Hello, and welcome to another episode of Inside the Outpost, the podcast from Outpost in the Burbs, a concert series in Montclair, New Jersey. I'm John Hammond. I'm the talent booker for the Outpost, and I'm here with Gail Prusslin, who's our Outpost board member and head of promotion. Hi, Gail. How are you doing? Great to be back with you again.
Hi, John. Great to be back with you as it's almost the end of 2023. Well, very close.
2023 as we know it. Yep.
Wow. Incredible. Well, now in its 36th year, Outpost in the Burbs is a nonprofit outreach organization in Montclair dedicated to building community through concerts and volunteerism. With this podcast, we're giving listeners an inside view of the artists who are performing here. We'll talk with the artists on their process, their inspirations, and we'll include an exclusive recording from each featured artist.
So this episode, we are very psyched to feature the great songwriter, band leader, singer, Ted Leo. Since the early 90s, Ted Leo has been one of the most progressive forces in independent music. He's actually a Bloomfield, New Jersey native, and he got his start in the New York hardcore scene, forming the band Citizen's Arrest shortly after he finished high school right down the street from us in Bloomfield. And then it was off to South Bend, Indiana for undergrad at Notre Dame, where he started Chisel, the punk band he'd continued to front for about a decade. Other projects along the way, Animal Crackers, Puzzlehead, the Sin Eaters, other cities as well. He was in DC, he was in Boston, he was back in DC again, where he was really fronting Ted Leo and the Pharmacists for a long time, releasing studio albums from 1999 through 2010, and a number of EPs along the way. A write-up in Stereo Gum noted that if you're attempting to chart out Ted Leo's whereabouts in the 90s, by cross-referencing various online biographies, you get a sense that he moved as busily across the map as his voice moves across his songs.
Right. I like that line a lot.
Yeah, totally.
In 2013, he and Aimee Mann formed the indie rock duo The Both and released one album. And he and Aimee have also done a podcast called The Art of Process, which we talk a little bit about in our interview. Ted released his solo album, The Hangman, in 2017, and since then, he has been writing and releasing music exclusively on Bandcamp for now. Mm-hmm. Throughout his career, Ted Leo has always stayed true to his punk roots, musically and politically. We were thrilled to have Ted play a show at the Outpost in early December, a hometown show of sorts. As noted, he's originally from Bloomfield, and we learned he's living in the area again now with his wife and young child. So it's great to have him back.
Indeed.
And the whole evening was a hometown show with the band Elk City opening and with Ted and Elk City playing two songs together with lots of friends and family and a great vibe in the audience.
It was just lots of good Montclair and I guess Bloomfield music folks around. It was great to see everybody. It was a really fun show, and we chatted with Ted a couple of days ahead of the show, and so here's that interview now.
Hey Ted, it's great to have you here on Inside the Outpost.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
You're welcome.
For taking the time to chat with us. And as you know, you'll be playing a show in Montclair, just a stone's throw away from where you grew up in Bloomfield.
Yes.
Right. And we understand you're back in Bloomfield, which we can get into in a minute. But I'm wondering, how did a teen from Bloomfield, New Jersey, get into the punk scene as you did and become such an innovator?
Well, it's funny. I mean, in the 80s and even the late 70s, when I was, a preteen, but got turned on to the music. The first show I ever saw was I think it was Adam and the Ants at the Capitol Theater in Passaic in 1980, I want to say. So I was 10, like I was pretty young. But by the mid 80s, when I could start availing myself of more public transpo and getting into the city and whatnot, I was into the music. I got back into punk rock for real via WFMU at the time, which was in East Orange, and listening to independent radio like that. And then weirdly, in my high school class, there were a lot of kids who were into hardcore and punk, and went on to continue to play music. Like, it was an odd mix. that what was the class of '88 for me, and so there were friends to do stuff with. Like I wasn't a total loner in that time. And then often people ask in any context, when did you decide to make it professional, or and I never, like, to this day I haven't decided that. I just never stopped, so started singing in bands back then, and then eventually started playing guitar, and one thing leads to the next. You start touring, you find you like it, you start writing better songs, you find you like that, and you continue to meet people, and collaborations happen, and you enjoy that, and then that, like, literally just leads up to today.
So was there much of a scene there? Were there places for your bands to play locally here?
Yeah, I mean, by the time I was in actually, like, gigging bands, like the Dirt Club, I think was closed or was about to close. It was kind of not really doing as much punk stuff, and was doing more dance nights and things. And there wasn't a ton up here in North Jersey. There was Maxwell's, but that was for a little bit later when you were 18 and up, but we played in the city all the time. I was in a hardcore band with a guy from Montclair, a guy who lived in Manhattan, and a guy who lived in Brooklyn back then, called Citizens Arrest. And it just didn't seem, it didn't seem crazy. We were all going to shows at CBGB's and other places downtown, and it would take as long for the guy who lived out Ocean Parkway in Brooklyn to get there as it would for us to get there. So you're from down there, Gail?
That's Ocean Parkway. You got it.
Oh, nice. Yeah. My mom's family's from Bay Ridge, so I kind of know that area as well. But like everybody, another thing that people are often quick to do is like, Jersey, what, how are you part of the New York scene? And it's like, dude, it's like 20 minutes, away. Like,
I'm sorry, I asked you that.
Yeah. Like, especially if you're driving or like taking the decamp bus or something, like, a half an hour, 35 minutes, and you could be at whatever venue. Someone who lived in another part of town who was taking the subway would take them twice as long to get there, so it didn't feel strange to us. And there's all that mythology about the big city, and even Springsteen, to be honest with you, like, we got to get out of Jersey, and like, it never really felt like these are just landscape features to me that you like. No. They're not psychic barriers, which sometimes I think people think they are.
But I think it shows some adventure there. Growing up in Brooklyn, way out in Brooklyn, we just mentioned. I mean, there were people who never left. Like, going into the city was a big deal. So it seems to me that you did have that spirit.
I guess
some spirit of adventure.
I guess so. Yeah, it's hard to say because I was doing it, and so I wasn't like conscious of taking on adventure. I was just conscious of going to see the bands that I wanted to see where they were playing, and finding my way to get there. A little bit of a more circuitous path, but like that was available to me, was like I could walk to the last stop on the Newark City subway and like take that to the path. Like there were ways as a kid that don't seem that crazy or as much of a pain,
Right.
So,
and your brothers too are musicians and playing the same music. So it wasn't like you were the only one in your family. Tell us a little bit about that.
Right. For a while it was. They're 4 and 5 years younger than me, which now that we're all adults doesn't mean a thing. But, the difference between being 12 and 16 or 14 and 19, is kind of a big deal during those years. So our friend groups didn't mix as much when we were younger. And I wasn't honestly like as aware of as much of what they were doing. Some of their stuff kind of came out of the basement like fully formed for me because I hadn't been there during their formation process,
So can you kind of walk us through the journey a bit from we spent a lot of time in Essex County and Lower Manhattan, but then what happened over the next 20 years? How do you view your last few decades?
Well, I went to college in Indiana, and I started a band out there called Chisel that was more of a mod, like kind of back to our roots in early early 80s, melodic punk, the Buzzcocks and the Jam, and even 60s stuff like the Small Faces and the Kinks and everything. And when the two guys who, this was a three-piece, and the two other guys in the band were a year younger than me, and when they graduated, we had planned to move to Chicago because we were out there by Chicago, in northern Indiana, and our bass player had family out there, but then our drummer was from DC, and he got an internship with Amnesty down there. So for me, I was going to move anyway, and I had friends in both of those places just from the music scene. So we moved to DC. I lived in DC for most of the 90s. There are people who think that I'm from DC, as well, which I'm happy to claim. It's a great place.
We like claiming you here, but yeah, I will acknowledge that's what I used to think too.
Right. Because I think that probably, if you weren't really, it's funny because if you were someone who was really into like hardcore punk, like crust punk, like,
oh yeah,
dirty,
that's where it was,
political punk back then, but you might know me more from my earlier band, Citizen's Arrest. When I toured in Europe for the first time in the late 90s, like there were people who were coming to see the band that I was in because they knew me from that, not from anything that I'd done in the rest of the 90s. Nice. But here, that band Chisel definitely had some success, and I think that's why people associate me with DC as an origin place more than anywhere else. Then I moved to Boston for a while, Brooklyn for a while, Rhode Island for a while, back to Brooklyn for a while, back to Rhode Island for a while, and now I'm back in Jersey.
Wrote some songs, put out some records.
Exactly, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Hanged Man is the latest album, I believe, right?
The Hanged Man, yeah, it came out a while ago now. I haven't done between COVID and I'll let the cat out of the bag, is that one of the main reasons we moved, I should say, back to the area is because had a very late in life child, and between my own parents getting a little older and us having a young one, like it kind of made sense to be around some more family.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
You mentioned your bandmate had an internship with Amnesty International. And certainly politics has played, just kind of brought to my mind, the role of politics in your music and punk in general. And so again, a little bit back to your roots, because I'm always interested, like how, was something that your family was, involved with it all, or, how did you get kind of meander into that passion of yours?
My family was not involved in politics per se, but I think my family instilled in me a sense of what constitutes justice, and that one should do what one can to seek that, for not just for yourself but for others as well. It's probably a very like old school Catholic, like New York Catholic kind of thing, to a degree. And to that end, like I went to Catholic school my entire life, which got very sour by the end of my tenure in that realm. But I'd be lying if I said that aspect of it, that kind of social justice aspect of it, didn't get in me. And then I would credit the music scenes that I was involved in the 80s for really providing space to learn more and talk about it more, and the kind of churn of ideas that existed in the punk world in the 80s, especially. It just became very important to me. It was the water that I was swimming in back then, and I don't want to get out of the pool to overlabor the metaphor. Yeah.
It's a big pool, and there's a lot of right. There's a lot there. And, the Hanged Man was like a year after an election. Mm-hmm. So that, I, imagine or got the sense of certainly played into, that album in some degree. Is that not right?
Yeah, for sure, absolutely. I mean, no more or less than any of my other albums, but despite my loathing of the idea that like bad times create good art, it did, that particular era of time gave me plenty more to think about, and I was kind of bound to write about it.
So Ted, I was a fan. I always enjoyed listening to the podcast you had done with Aimee Mann, The Art of the Process, I believe it's called.
Yeah, The Art of Process. Yeah.
Right. And it's great for us. I mean, the three of us who do this pod, honestly, we're all, we're music fans at heart. We're not creators particularly, but, we have said several times that we're all just in love with the mystery of how this process happens and the work that goes into creation. And some of the chats that you guys had done with different people, I'll acknowledge those were inspiring as we were starting our pod.
Good. I'm glad. That's
well.
Great.
Was that something you'd always wanted to do, to kind of look into that and delve in with different people?
I mean, I think that it's something that we probably both did do, and that's why we decided maybe we should make a podcast out of this. Egg chicken as opposed to chicken egg in that sense. Aimee, we both come from just picking up an instrument and banging around on it until you figure out something to do with it. But then she went to music school. She went to Berklee College in Boston, and I never was taught or learned any theory. So we come at things a little differently in regard to our understanding of what we're doing and how we do it, and I think that's what makes us interested in continuing to work with and talk with each other about that, because in me, I think she sees a little bit of like a wilder energy, and in her I see like expertise that I can learn from, and that we thought would make good conversation with other people that in creative fields very loosely defined. We'd certainly talked to almost exclusively like artists, comedians, visual artists, writers, illustrators, and musicians. We had to stop the podcast, honestly, which maybe you'll understand, because it just was too much work. I did all the editing myself, and we would have these sprawling like 3-hour conversations that I would try to mix and distill down to something that was like hopefully not an hour and a half, which was like really, really hard. And it took me all week, and it was just like a third job that I wasn't getting paid for, So it's at least on hiatus, but we had begun to talk about even expanding the idea, because the idea of, what constitutes like creative work, because I think that it's a rare field out there that you couldn't glean something interesting from the practitioner about their process, how they approach it, that could then be applied in other situations.
Yeah, and there's a number of shows. There's shows for writers that kind of dig into that as well, that I can think of, that I tend to like to listen to a lot. So what would you say about like how your process has changed over the years, and from being 15 and picking up a guitar to where you are now? And if you want to write a song, what happens at this point?
Right. Well, I don't have one particular way of doing things. It's often the case that a turn of phrase or a vocal melody will kick things off. It's often the case that I will just pick up a guitar and noodle and have a melodic instrumental idea first. But I think that what is general to my process is that lyrically, I am always searching for something that feels important for me to sing, even more so than write about, to me. And with the hope that as the things that other people have sung that have been important to me over the years, that it will then resonate with other people. So I'm not necessarily thinking outward in terms of like how something's going to land with an audience. I'm thinking inward, but also factoring in that I want it to resonate with an audience, if that makes sense. Yeah.
And that it's interacting with all the other things that are already in your head.
Mm-hmm.
That's, I mean, it's funny because like going back and thinking about this is going to be a fun show coming up and kind of going back through your albums, I realized I may not have kind of articulated at the time, but you're touching this great point for me, which is something that's so direct and like, guy banging guitar and singing, but also just working in so many references from, a 2,000-year-old Bible story or the Irish Revolution of what's that, 1916, and or a certain folk melody completely recontextualized. And I haven't managed to phrase this in the form of a question, but good job, Ted Leo.
Thanks. Well, I appreciate you saying that. I mean, I think sometimes I find it a heavy lift, but if I can take it all the way to the finish line, it feels good with something like that. There are also, of course, there are times when you just want to write a love song, and I kind of like I have to set myself that goal or intention when I want to do that. And it usually veers into love under the duress of war and suffering, or whatever. But
it's always the case.
I mean, it is always the case, right? And yeah, like and in those cases I do tend to also maybe try a little harder to allow the song to breathe in a way that, like, if someone can't connect with it with all of that, like they can at least connect with it on a lighter level,
And does writing for yourself as a solo artist, is that any different than when you're writing for a band?
It has become, yeah. When I started playing solo, it was more in the context of just taking my band stuff and breaking it down, which was also really always interesting to me. Like I've never stopped, even in my most active times of band touring, which in the early 2000s, like was, over 200 shows a year for many, many years. I was on the road all the time, but I would always end a year or end like a cycle by going out and doing some solo shows, because it's like, I like singing, and I mean, some people might consider what I do to have some bombast because it is me and an electric guitar and it's pretty loud, but it's a lot less bombast than like with a big rhythm section and everything else, and it does allow me some quieter, more introspective moments, and I get to break my own songs back down again and like see what makes them tick and how they work, and then I kind of come back to the band with maybe even a different idea of how I'm going to play this or that song or this or that part, and they inform each other, they bounce off each other, and I really do kind of cherish them both.
Yeah, it also makes me think of about maybe 6 or 7 years ago. That's that right, John? We had John Doe play solo at the Outpost, and it's that kind of thing. And we weren't doing the podcast back then, but Just got the sense that he was able to really have that experience, a new experience with those songs that are often, so much more sonically, involved. And here he is just, with his guitar. And
right.
And I, one of the things that stood out for me on that show was he played, A Case of You. And, this whole notion of a punk artist versus a folk artist. And, I know I was listening to the interview you did with Evan Davies recently, and you mentioned that somebody had, I don't know, texted or posted somewhere about it. Your next album going to be a folk album, Ted Leo. So,
right.
and as somebody who personally gravitates, well, I'm kind of all over the map, but sometimes I think those lines do get blurred. And if it's somebody who's speaking, if the lyrically is, or the intent is rebellious, or, then really what is it? You know?
Right. Yeah. And those categories are useful for some things, but they're pointless for other things, as John was saying, like musically, I've always incorporated, not just lyrically, but musically, I've incorporated, 60s R&B and ska and reggae and mod, bombastic mod rock, along with folk and what anyone would sort of traditionally consider to be punk, I think it's interesting. I think that I could be wrong about this, and maybe this is like an old man yells at the cloud kind of thing, but I feel like a lot, just because of the many years that since, these genres were somewhat established, like there's a natural calcification that can go on, and there's some gatekeeping, within communities that can go on. You could go back to Pete Seeger cutting Bob Dylan's electric guitar off at Newport, but I count myself lucky to have been getting really turned on to the idea that I could do this kind of thing, from bands like the Clash, for example, who also did all of those things.
Sure.
The first time I listened to London Calling, I was a little unsure about like where some of these directions were going with them, but very quickly I saw the entirety of it, and how one can better express oneself, by veering this way or that, while also retaining kind of a core identity. And, so I at least have that as an example of, how to do it.
Nice. Well, it's exciting for us as listeners.
Thank you.
We're looking forward to the show. So what can you preview for us about how what's going to happen on the night of the 1st?
Right. Well, we'll see how sound check goes, and we'll see how loud.
And whether you stick around, is that
no, just in terms of how loud it's actually going to be. But I mean, I'm playing electric, and just me and my guitar and my amp and a vocal mic, and I'll be pulling probably from really 35 years of music that I've written. I'll do some covers probably,
like Dirty Old Town.
That's right. Thank you for reminding me, Gail.
Nice.
Thank you for reminding me of that. Yes, I got to write that down. But you can yell. That's one I can like. I don't need a month to re-rehearse that. You can just yell that out if I don't play it. All right. And I'm gonna probably. I think that myself and Elk City, who's opening, are gonna join each other on a song or two for over the course of the night, and
that'll be fun.
Yeah, should be good. Yeah.
Good.
I'm psyched. I get to drive. It's a 10-minute drive home, so that'll be nice.
Can't beat that.
The hometown show. We always love them. And what's coming up? What can we look forward to?
I'm doing my interrupted by COVID but annual Christmas shows with Aimee Mann. Only in LA this year, unfortunately. At Largo from the 18th through the 21st, 4 nights. And that's a variety show. We have comedians and friends and other people, other musicians join us and everything. And we were supposed to have done it. Well, she did it in New York last year, but I got COVID the night before the shows started, so I had to pull out of the shows, which was a bit of a scramble because we actually have it's kind of scripted, we have a plot and everything.
Wow.
So she had to do a lot of juggling at the last minute. But hopefully we'll get back to the East with that. And then in the spring, the next year is the 20th anniversary of my Shake the Sheets album. So I'm going to be finally doing some more band touring.
Oh, excellent.
In 2024. Starting in the spring, we'll be in the area. I think we're playing Warsaw and Brooklyn in, I want to say June or something like that. And I have written and recorded and sort of released a lot of music over the last couple of years, but I've been keeping it siloed on my Bandcamp page for the time being. But I'm gonna sort of rework some of that, remix and remaster it, and also with a bunch of new stuff, have a new album that I'll release more widely in the new year.
Very exciting.
Yeah, thank you.
Forward to that.
Thanks.
Well, thanks for being with us today.
My pleasure.
We're looking forward to the show. We will go out with a song from the show through the magic of radio and editing. Ted Leo, great to chat with you.
Thanks. Good to chat with you too.
Thank you, Ted. Bye.
Awesome.
Oh, I've been sometimes under your wall, peeping it out where I'm not welcome. Seen you one time stumble and fall, but I still love you, you see. I've been 5 times back to the well, seeking to tell myself for something, but you can't teach what you can't sell, and I'm not the only one you see. Still would say if you asked, it's built on bonding, but others will take it all and leave you wanting. I know you've done this before to them, but here's where it ends and where I stand. You can't hold on to yourself, for I have got your holy head in my hands. And I've been a long time out at your wall, seeking to call you back from over. 'Cause when you're out there you seem so tall, but you're not the only one you see. Still would say if you asked, it's built on bonding, but others will take it all and leave you wanting. I know you've done this before to them, but here's where it ends and where I stand. You say you can't hold yourself back, well I have got your safety head in my hands. And I've been sometimes under your hedge, ran like a rabbit from your rifles. You had me 2 times out on the ledge, but I still love you, you see.
So that was Under the Hedge, Ted Leo's solo at Outpost in the Burbs from the 1st of December. this year here in Montclair. That to me, we were going back, and that one I flagged when we were listening live to the show as like, wow, that one came across really well. And it kind of struck me, he's just up there solo with his guitar, but he's kind of accomplishing the whole like melodicism of the band arrangement through that. And that's a real talent for somebody to do, just get up there with a solo with a guitar and accomplish all that.
Yeah, I totally agree, John. That also reminds me when he played Can't Go Back from the Hanged Man, he said, well, he made a comment about that this is the first time he wants to learn how to play this solo because it's so rhythmic and there's so much going on.
Yeah.
In the recorded, the album version. So he, I guess he really wanted to work on it and saw it as a challenge, and he like totally nailed it. And so to that point, he's a guy up there with a guitar, the lyrics are amazing. They're complex. And the music is just powerful. And, it's like a one-man band, but, he just so engaging and pulls it all together in such a way.
The way he approached the show, I mean, I guess this was a bit of a one-off. It wasn't, I mean, it looked like there had been other shows with, the Pharmacists or a version of the Pharmacists. I mean, I saw like there was a video from something up in Boston a couple of months before our show.
Yeah, Somerville or something like that, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I guess he's doing some of each, but I mean, it was funny that this show for him, he seemed to take it so seriously as a hometown show, which we appreciate the effort that artists are going to pull in. But, I mean, Ted mentioned several times through the course of the evening, how much thought he had put into the set list, and that he kind of really, he kind of threw away the set list the day before the show and started over with what he wanted to do. I don't know. I mean, for me, it all came across great, both as we say, solo guitar, and also he and Elk City did collab on a couple of songs. One of their songs in their set where he came in and added some guitar atmospherics, as well as the last song of his set where the band kind of, they just kind of walked in and slotted in the middle of the song, which was a great moment. That was a lot of fun, and one of those unique, only at a show kind of experiences that you get to see.
Yeah, and he talked about rearranging the set list.
Yeah.
As you just mentioned, putting a lot of thought into it, but also because Shane MacGowan had just passed away, I guess the day before our show, and we were talking about Dirty Old Town when we spoke with him, right? That was just 2 days prior. So
yeah, I had to go back and check. I had to look on the internet, like, when did Shane MacGowan die? Because it was like the day after we recorded the interview.
Exactly. It was.
And you asked him to do Dirty Old Town. I mean, it's not such a left field request because it's a song that he's always done. But good foresight there for an unfortunate event, obviously, and
right.
Shane's death's meant a lot to a lot of people. It was just it was a good way to kind of get into that whole spirit. And I mean, to me, and we were talking about this a bit in the interview as well, is that middle ground where punk and folk overlap, and that means both musically, arrangingly, and also politically as well. And to me, that's the best thing. I mean, even back to Under the Hedge, he was saying, I gave him this whole rap about like, I love how you're incorporating, 500-year-old folk influences and into your punk music. And he said, like, yeah, sometimes I'm just writing love songs. And I went back to Under the Hedge and like, yeah, that's kind of one of those, it's just a love song. But honestly, that melody, how it's down here and then it jumps up and then comes back down again. again, that could be a 500-year-old, reel from Scotland or something like that. I love how he's building in all those influences and integrating them all.
Yeah, I'm listening to his songs a lot these last few weeks. I really am struck by the, the intersection of his vulnerability, but his sensitivity, politically, minded, and the music, is just rocking, and it's punk, and it's exciting, So, there's so many layers to it, John, that it really is. It's really so great to listen to his catalog, And speaking of catalog, his set list was 22 songs, much to the chagrin of, some of our, the stage manager was like, "What?" But
it was saying, "This seems like a lot, doesn't it?"
It seems like right. But it flowed really, really well, and he really covered a lot of ground from, I believe, every Pharmacist album, and then, of course, the songs for Shane MacGowan and the Dirty Old Town, and then I really was so moved by the a cappella song that he did, School Days Over, just really talking about, and that's a Ewan McCall, excuse me, McCall,
yeah.
right? And of a serious nature of children, and like thinking about a lot of world issues now, in particular, right, about what's happening to children, and how our care or lack of care about children in various situations, and situations of war, as sang Lullaby of London, also another really strong, powerful song about war and all the horrors. Also talking about Henry Kissinger just died, so he through that,
he pulled out a Billy Bragg song,
right.
Chilly Waters Run Red.
I just wanted to chime in there that I learned that song was actually written by Bernice Reagan of Sweet Honey in the Rock.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah. Chillier Waters Run Red. So, right, Billy Bragg recorded
that makes sense. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, when you point out those connections, again, Sweet Honey in the Rock, Billy Bragg, where these folks are overlapping is, really great, fertile musical place. And that was, it's nice. It's nice. Sorry, it's nice for, it's nice for an artist to come and just play where he knows everyone's listening to the whole set, and he can get into all that. And, he brought us along and said, like, I'm singing this song because Henry Kissinger just died, and I'm singing this song, with Shane MacGowan's death, and he did that Rock the Machine that is well known by Lisa O'Neill, and then saw her singing at Shane MacGowan's funeral last week.
Right.
She did the Kirsty MacColl part from Tale of New York. And speaking of Ewan McCall, who's Kirsty's father, I believe. Don't write us letters. Right. I love how it all overlaps. We were talking a bit after the show, and talking about like English punk and folk acts, some and Irish ones as well. And we were each trading like, oh, I love these guys and those guys, and he told me about the Merry Wallopers, which I don't know of, but I feel like I've seen them. Maybe it's because I've searched them in the last few days, and maybe it's because I've been, listening to a lot of Pogues music the last few days, but they're kind of coming up in my feeds as well right now. So it's all coming together. I love that.
It's coming together. And I love that before he played the Lisa O'Neill song, he said, well, this is the doom folk portion of the show. And I'll get back to the power pop punk in a bit. So, again, just those influences and those connections, he really pulled it all together, and it was such a great night. It was really an outstanding night.
Yeah, exactly. And we'd been working on getting Ted Leo there for some years now, and I'd always known he'd come from originally from our New Jersey area, so figured it'd be great to bring him back and present that. So worked out great. Well done, everybody.
Indeed, well done.
Yeah. So that was a fun one. So this will be the last podcast that we drop here in 2023 before the holidays. Hope everyone has a great holiday. And we still have one more show coming up, which is the Loudon Wainwright show, but we've already done the podcast for that. But then lots of fun coming up in 2024. And we have now 4 shows that have been announced that we can kind of get into. Looking very much forward to kicking off the season again with the Light of Day singer-songwriters in the round session on January 27th. This year, that'll be James Maddock and Anthony D'Amato from Fantastic Cat, and Danielia Cotton and Adam Ezra and Emily Grove, who was just there with us at our Joni Mitchell tribute, and Amanda Cross and Derek Cruz, and Jake Thistle, who was recently on the John Prine tribute, and Williams Honor and John Caspi, who've both been at most of the recent Light of Day shows, and Denny Bonet and Chris Flynn, who were recently at our Joni Mitchell tribute, all put together and emceed by the man himself, Joe Durso. And we so
That's
appreciate
a long list of folks, but it's always a great night, John. Always fun. Had to sit together on stage and do that round robin and play with each other. And we're happy to partner with them again. It must be our 11th or 12th time.
Yeah.
No, I have lost count, but it's great to be partnering with them again.
We really, we honor their work. Light of Day Foundation, benefiting research for Parkinson's and ALS and PSP, and want to help in whatever way we can. So that's exciting. And then some more shows from there. You want to get into it?
Well, we have on February 3rd, Foy Vance, the really wonderful Irish singer-songwriter. He's been sharing a lot online, and we have Bonnie Bishop opening. I wanted to make note of that for that show. That his song "Guiding Light," is that the title of it, John? Has been covered by Elton John and some other pretty notable folks,
major names.
And so he's been really there's been a lot of activity, and I'm really not so familiar with his music. I've been starting to listen to it. A really beautiful songwriter, but I've been telling people that he's coming. And in fact, I was talking to a couple at TED show, and they were sitting up front. It was the first time they were at the Outpost, and they said, "Wow, you have Foy Vance coming too." They had bought their tickets for that as well. So
fantastic.
Really looking forward to that one.
Always happy to see new folks around.
And looking at the list here, March 28th, the great Mary Gauthier with Jamie Harris opening. Mary's really fabulous singer-songwriter. I know she did a project with veterans. I don't know the name of that. I know that was something that was really moving and really powerful, working with veterans and recording some of their songs and their writing and working with them. I know that she had done that work. So I'm really looking forward to her coming. I'm not remembering if she's ever played the Outpost. Do you know, John?
I need to go back and check. Not in my tenure.
No, definitely.
We haven't worked it out. We've been talking about it for a couple of years. I'm
thinking way back. But I don't think she has. I don't think so. But we should check.
We can check.
We should check. Check the records on that one.
If you were there, let us know. Put it that way.
Okay, exactly. Well, John, if you weren't there and I weren't there in the 27 years we've been in Montclair, she probably wasn't. It's probably her first time coming. I don't know.
It'll be a great one. And then just announced also on April 20th, coming up, the great progressive bluegrass band Nefesh Mountain, who are actually also somewhat locally based here in the Montclair area. I'm very glad to get them in. I've been kind of paying attention to their building over the last couple of years. We had some conversations before COVID happened, and then obviously that happened, and they've done some other shows in the area, but they're really building a regional and a national reputation. In fact, I just this evening heard an announcement that they'll be doing a major radio performance here in the New York area, which is exciting.
Yeah, I know they've been on tour. I think maybe in the Midwest.
And they'll have a new album coming up, so that'll be fun. That's April 20th, and then more shows to come and more shows to be announced for spring 2024 and beyond.
And how do people find out about these shows, John? They need to sign up for our email newsletter and be sure to, we're going to be talking about that right now, but make sure people, everyone listening, make sure that you stay in touch and stay connected, because John has a lot of news he'll be sharing. We'll be sharing it with all of you.
A few things up our sleeves. Yes,
yeah, exactly.
So this has been another episode of Inside the Outpost, a behind-the-scenes podcast from Outpost in the Burbs. Our show is mixed and edited by John Paul Uva. Our artwork is by Krista Schultz. Michael Stahl is house photographer. Rob Halper is our house videographer. And we get social media help from Jaclyn Antonacci. Our theme music is I Can't Settle by the aforementioned, to be appearing at Light of Day on January 27th, James Maddock. And now, Gail, what were you saying people need to do?
This is what I was saying. Be sure to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Instagram and TikTok. Twitter, formerly Twitter, now X, right?
X. We're going to be referring to that site as the site formerly known as Twitter, I think as long as they exist at this point, is my estimate.
I think so too. All right. And also check out our show videos on our YouTube channel, and sign up for our mailing list at outpostintheburbs.org. If you like the show, please subscribe, rate it, and review it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Well, John, I've enjoyed chatting with you. Oh, you wanted to say one more thing?
And really come to the shows, come see some concerts, make a New Year's resolution. Like, I'm going to go out to the shows and see all those great bands they're talking about. We're looking forward to seeing everybody out at the Outpost, or even some other venues. That's nice too. We try to pay attention as much as we can and try to see as many acts as we can. So it's always great to see friends and Outpost attendees wherever we may see them. So
exactly.
Hope everybody has a great holiday.
Exactly, John. I wish you and your family and everybody listening a great holiday, a great new year.
And you as well, Gail.
Love and peace and all good things, and lots of music, lots of live music.
Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye.